Welcome to day 4 of George's Marvelous Medicine. We're going to be reading chapters 4 and 5, and then at the end of this, you can take the little quiz to make sure you're understanding what I'm reading and make a prediction about what you think is going to happen next. So at this point, George has gone around the house. He's put in various things from the bathroom in the big stewing pot to make his marvelous medicine. He went into the laundry room. He went into the kitchen. Chapter 4 is called Animal Pills. Guessing based on that title alone, you might have some predictions going on in your head. Probably not very good ones. Let's see what George gets up to. At this point, George suddenly has an extra good wheeze. Although the medicine cupboard in the house was forbidden ground, what about the medicines his father kept on the shelf in the shed next to the hen house? The animal medicines. What about those? Nobody had ever told him he mustn't touch them. Let's face it, George said to himself. Hairspray and shaving cream and shoe polish are all very well, and they will no doubt cause some splendid explosion inside the old geezer. But with what the magic mixture now needs is a touch of the real stuff, real pills and real tonics to give it such a punch and muscle. Once again, do not try to make something like this at home. It's not safe or healthy. George picked up the heavy 3/4 full pot and carried it out the back door. He crossed the farmyard and headed straight for the shed alongside the hen house. He knew his father wouldn't be there. He was out haymaking in one of the meadows. George entered the dusty old shed and put the stewing pot on the bench. Then he looked up at the medicine shelf. There were 5 big bottles there. 2 were full of pills. 2 were full of the runny stuff, and 1 was full of powder. I'll use them all, George said. Grandma needs them. Boy, does she need them. The first bottle he took down was an orange-colored powder. The label said, for chickens with foul pest, hen gripe, sore beaks, gammy legs, crocker frittles, egg trouble, broodiness, or loss of feathers. Mix 1 spoonful only with each bucket of feed. Well, George said, aloud to himself, as he tipped in the whole bottle. So I'm noticing here, George is adding way too much medicine. The chickens just get 1 spoonful with a whole bucket of food. Well, George said aloud to himself as he tipped in the whole bottle, the old bird won't be losing any feathers after she's had a dose of this. I like that line because sometimes when you call someone like a bird, it's an insult, and she doesn't actually have feathers, but the insult makes it sound like she does, if that makes sense. The next bottle he took down had about 500 gigantic purple pills in it. For horses with hoarse throats, it said on the label. The horse-throated horse should suck 1 pill twice a day. Grandma may not have a hoarse throat, George said, but she certainly got a sharp tongue. Maybe they'll cure that instead. Into the pot went the 500 gigantic purple pills. Oh, I almost forgot to show you George in the shed looking at the medicines. Here is a picture of him looking at the animal medicines inside the shed. Then there was a bottle of thick yellowish liquid for cows, bulls, and bullocks, the label said. Will cure cowpox, cow mange, crumpled horn, bad breath in bulls, earache, toothache, headache, hoofache, tail ache, and sore udders. That grumpy old cow in the living room has every one of those rotten illnesses, George said. She'll need it all. With a slop and a gurgle, the yellow liquid splashed into the now nearly full stew pot. The next bottle contained a brilliant red liquid. Sheep dip, it said on the label, for sheep with sheep rot and for getting rid of ticks and fleas. Mix 1 spoonful in a gallon of water and slosh it over the sheep. Caution, do not make the mixture any stronger or the wool will fall out and the animal will be naked. So, what are you thinking? Is he going to put the whole thing in? Probably. That's his rule. By gum, said George. How I'd love to walk in and slosh it all over Grandma and watch the ticks and fleas jump off her. But I can't. I mustn't. So she'll have to drink it instead. He poured the bright red medicine in the pot. The last bottle on the shelf was a pale green pills. Pig pills, the label announced, for pigs with pork prickles, tender trotters, bristle blight, and swine sickness. Give 1 pill per day. In severe cases, 2 pills may be given, but more than that will make the pig rock and roll. Just the stuff, said George, for that miserable old pig back there in the house. She'll need a very big dose. He tipped all the green pills, hundreds and hundreds of them, into the stewing pot. Here's a picture of him pouring in the pills. There was an old stick lying on the bench that had been used for stirring paint. George picked it up and started to stir his marvelous concoction. The mixture was as thick as cream. As he stirred and stirred, many wonderful colors rose up from the depths and blended together. Pinks, blues, greens, yellows, and browns. George went on stirring until it was all well mixed. But even so, there were still hundreds of pills lying on the bottom that hadn't even melted. And there was his mother's splendid powder puff floating on the surface. I shall have to boil it all, George said. 1 good quick boil on the stove is all it needs. And with that, he staggered back towards the house with an enormous, heavy stewing pot. On the way, he passed the garage, so he went in to see if he could find any other interesting things, and he added the following. So here is him walking by the garage and looking in and deciding maybe there's some more things I could add. On the way, he passed the garage, so he went in to see if he could find any other interesting things. He added the following. 1/2 pint of engine oil to keep Grandma's engine going smoothly. People don't have engines. Some antifreeze to keep her radiator from freezing up in the winter. People don't have radiators inside of them. A handful of grease to grease her creaking joints. Not so sure it works that way. Then back to the kitchen. This next chapter is pretty short. It's only 2 pages. Chapter 5, The Cook-Up. In the kitchen, George put the heavy stewing pot on the stove and turned up the gas flame underneath, as high as it would go. George, came the awful voice from the next room. It's time for my medicine. Not yet, Grandma, George called back. There's still 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. What mischief are you up to in there now? Granny screeched. I hear noises. George thought it best not to answer this one. He found a long wooden spoon in the kitchen drawer and began stirring hard. The stuff in the pot got hotter and hotter. Soon the marvelous mixture began to froth and foam. Rich blue smoke, the color of peacocks, rose from the surface of the liquid, and a fiery, fearsome smell filled the kitchen. Yeah, I bet. He put all sorts of stuff in there to make it smell not so great. It made George choke and splutter. It was a smell unlike any he had smelled before. It was brutal and bewitching smell, spicy and staggering, fierce and frenzied, full of wizardry and magic. Whenever he got a whiff up his nose, firecrackers went off in his skull, and electricity prickles ran along the back of his legs. Here is a picture of him stirring the stewing pot and smelling the smoke, or steam, or whatever that is. It was wonderful to stand there stirring this amazing mixture and to watch the smoking blue and bubbling and frothing and foaming as though it were alive. At one point he could have sworn he saw bright sparks flashing in the swirling foam. And suddenly George found himself dancing around the steaming pot, chanting strange words that came into his head out of nowhere. Fiery broth and witch's brew, foamy froth and riches blue, fume and spume and spoondrift spray, fizzle, swizzle, shout hooray, watch it sloshing, swashing, sploshing, hear it hissing, squishing, spissing, Grandma better start to pray. And here is him dancing his magical dance. So make sure that you answer those couple questions and make your prediction for the next chapters.